Welcome to the channel.
Well,
It's
thank you so much for having me.
I was thinking big good place to start by telling the audience who you are.
My name is Arvin Bautista. I am also known as Greasy Pig Studios. We're mostly graphics and motion graphics and visual effects design company based in Los Angeles. But if I'm lucky enough, I also get to direct some stuff on the side, including 10 years ago when we directed a Dazzler fan music video. And then 2 years after that, we released a sequel, which was Lila Cheney and the New Mutants, also featuring Dazzler.
Gotta always have Dazzler in there somewhere.
Yeah,
So I just rewatched the two music videos before this interview, not for
sure.
the first time.
Mhm.
I'm actually a long-standing fan. I don't remember how exactly they came to my attention, but I remember watching them years ago, maybe 10 years ago at this
Yeah.
point. It
Do you
was,
know if the second video, if both videos were already out when you discovered them, or the Dazzler one was out first and then you were?
I think actually I just discovered it backwards. I discovered the Lila Cheney
Yeah.
music video first, and then realized that there was a Dazzler one as well. I'm personally a tad more of a Lila Cheney fan,
Sure.
just because of my own personal music taste.
Of course.
But yeah, I feel like it was that, and God, I had the Stormtrooper spoof on cops. They're
Oh
like
yeah,
the first
Troops, of
two
course.
fan
Yeah. I mean,
projects that somehow, and I'm like, wow, these three things are amazing. So what? I mean, there's so much to ask you about both of these projects. I suppose a great place to start is at the beginning. What
sure.
kind of made you sit up in bed one morning and go, "Today I'm going to make a Dazzler music video"?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the common thing is that we're all giant X-Men fans, obviously. And with you guys also like a 90s X-Men, obviously that was, the thing that got got me into it. So that was a thing that I had always been huge on. I was born in the Philippines, and the X-Men reboot, the Jim Lee reboot, happened in the early 90s, and just when I was in elementary school, and it was gigantic in the Philippines. And like comic books are such an important piece of pop culture in the Philippines. And at the time, which is funny, I didn't even realize it, but the Uncanny books were being drawn by Will Sportasio, who
Mhm.
is Filipino, and I didn't the name isn't like immediately Filipino to me, and I wouldn't have necessarily immediately assumed that like a Filipino person would be drawing one of the X-Men comics. But like like that, I think like aesthetically, for me as an Asian person and now an Asian American, like that aesthetic was just so immediately like recognizably awesome to me. It had like anime influences, which I think just like really made it so much more better. Anyway, so that's how I became an X-Men fan, which is I think similar to many people here in America. The animated series and all of that stuff. It was just a great time to get into it.
Yes.
But then as I got a little bit older, like I think like the popularity of the X-Men comics waned a little bit naturally after that big boom, obviously. And it wasn't until college that I started I got access to like the older X-Men comics, and I would read, and I was able to start reading them kind of like chronologically from the very, very beginning, which is something that, as a kid, we didn't have
Sure.
access to those things, but now you have graphic novels and digital collections and all of that stuff. And, uh, and one of the things I always loved about X-Men, especially during that time, which I think, I don't know if it's to its credit or not, but like, even though it was a reboot, I felt like there was so much reference to old stuff that had happened before that
Mhm.
I, as a kid, had no idea what any of this stuff, like 80s X-Men, I didn't know much about. So we're talking about like Siege Perilous and the Outback era, like they would reference these, and they would reference like Dazzler, like I didn't know too much about them because she wasn't around too much in the 90s. But I always just loved that this existed. There would, the asterisk with the editor's notes and all of that stuff, referencing comics that I had no idea about. So when I was reading them finally and reading them in kind of chronological order, seeing how all of that stuff really happened, and that's when I, was able to discover where Dazzler fit into that timeline. And the thing that I ended up really gravitating towards her about was that it was happening, her series was happening during all of this like really heavy 80s X-Men stuff, right? Like Fall of the Mutants and Inferno, so like really, really like intense life or death stuff. And then, but like at the same time, Dazzler has her series, and it's just like pretty silly, but like so much more like grounded, and it's just her about like trying to go on auditions and like having a romance with, an old movie star, and it almost like I found it really charming, or like a really good palate cleanser. And I think like it really helps round out the world of the X-Men, that like it's the X-Men story is about mutants, but like not all mutants are superheroes, and that's what I really, really gravitated towards that. So at some point I wanted to make my own film, and I can't remember what came first, but I was like, I want to do something different. I didn't want to just do a straight up fan film. Like the MCU was kind of like moving along at that point, and I think we were seeing what a world where really good and really faithful adaptations of stuff could look like. And that if I was to make something, I didn't want it to immediately compare to the production values of the MCU. Yeah, and like the crazy costumes and all, just like and the crazy VFX and like stuff that I just knew I would never be able to compete with. So I was thinking about what I can do that would grab people's attention, would be unique, and something that I was gonna guess was something we were not gonna see, on screen in a while, which is and that's why I ended up with Dazzler, and then it was a similar way with Lila Cheney. Like when I released the Dazzler video, that's when I made it not really realizing how big of a fan base there was, or not that it wasn't as big. I had no idea when I released it, and I released it on Tumblr. It was like the height of Tumblr at the time, and just like all of these people just coming out of the woodwork, about how giant fans there were, and they would ask for a sequel, and it actually almost empowered me more to do an even deeper cut for the sequel. That like if there are Dazzler fans, this character that at the time was, the most you hear about her was on lists of like the worst X-Men ever,
I do not agree with those lists.
But like that's, it's, and I was like, all right, well, let's, how can I go even deeper? And arguably I'm a bigger Dazzler fan than I am a Lila Cheney fan, but like, it's still, again, it's in that world of like, there are these mutants that exist in this world that have lives that are completely separate from the X-Men. And I think like that's so cool, and that like that's how you can do stories in that world that aren't, immediately in like of the core characters.
Love that. Well, having said that though, why not just a straight up then narrative day in the life of Dazzler type short?
I mean, with Dazzler, I think like the music is just important anyway, and I think it gives it, the song gives it it gives it a score. Like I'm gonna have to do a score anyway, and I'm probably gonna have to do a song anyway. So, and I love the '80s vibe. Like I had been steeped in that vibe for a while, and I really wanted to do something in that style. I just think, like music video and Dazzler, just like it just seemed really logical to do it in that way, which is crazy to me because I'm not a musician at all, and I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So I actually tapped a friend of mine who had done sound on a bunch of other short films and web series that I had been working on, Taiwo Hurd. he co-wrote and produced and did a lot of the music for the Dazzler and Lila Cheney videos. So he's really the musical genius
So he
behind
wrote
that part. We co-wrote the lyric. We co-wrote, I think, like me and Gentry, who played Dazzler, and Ty kind of like co-wrote the Dazzler song together. For the Lila Cheney song, he wrote the music parts and I wrote the lyrics of it. So yeah, like it's extremely like collaborative because I would not be able to do any of that stuff at all.
Great.
Yeah.
I as well have zero music talent. I mean, I enjoy music, but I could not create it, write it. Excuse me. So,
but to the point that you were saying, it actually is still a day in the life of Dazzler, and I think me as a filmmaker will always gravitate towards having a story. So even if I said I wanted to do a music video, it wasn't going to be just this like her performing or like a montage of stuff that has nothing to do with anything. It would still have a beginning, middle, and end. And if I'm going to make a Dazzler video, I would still want to make it. I want to be able to cram as many details or like try to encapsulate her as much as I can, because this was probably going to be my only one shot about it, And also, like, if she is ever going to make it into live action, and then she eventually did, like, and I think what we saw, what we see is that like it's for characters like this, if they're not the main character, it's so easy for them to get shortchanged. Like you don't really learn too much about them.
Yeah, no, she was just kind of there in the background,
and I had
a light show kind of thing.
It's really funny because that didn't exist at all when I made both of the videos. I think realistically you could assume that she would have eventually shown up, especially once they did the reboot, like the prequel, X-Men
started going back in time. But...
Yeah, when they started going back in time, I would have thought that she would have shown up in Days of Future Past, and then she didn't, and then I would have thought that she would have shown up in Apocalypse, and then she didn't. And I was like, all right.
Oh, she did show up in Phoenix. That was, but yeah, see, that's how important her role was. Going back to what you were saying about still having it being a narrative and a day in her life, though. Again, I just rewatched it for the umpteenth untold time before jumping on here with you. Sure. And the thing that still sticks out is how much of it feels like an 80s music video. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what you just said is part of, there were a lot of things that made us stick to the 80s, but 80s music videos, were much more the musician wakes up and this is a day. It's a narrative. Yeah. Whereas at some point music videos became, you're absolutely right, just recorded stage show. And then, now I don't even know if we have music videos anymore. But really reminded me of kind of going for a very early Madonna's vibe, especially with the Dazzler one, before she kind of reinvented herself in the 90s. The Material Girl version of Madonna and those type of videos.
Sure. I did do a lot of research, and I did a lot of research on the Lila Cheney one. I'm a big Cyndi Lauper fan, so like there's a lot of like girls just want to have fun on there, and I think it did go with the vibe of what I wanted to say about Dazzler's character, which is again that like she is a person that has her own dreams, that all of these people are trying to put their aspirations on her and telling her what she should be doing, and she just wants to carve her own path. And if she gets to be a superhero, if she wants to help people, she will go and do that, but you're not going to tell her what.
She's just a girl who wants to have fun.
Yeah, she wants to have fun. She wants to play her music, and like, I'm not going to join a team. Sure. They come to her. I was like, hey, we just fought, whatever, the Hellfire Club. You want to join the team? It's like, no, it's like, thanks, but I got my own thing going,
is that who the Men in Black were meant to be. That was my
Ye-
bit. I wasn't sure if they were like government stooges, which
It's
was also kind of a thing in the books at that time, or what.
Yeah, it wasn't they were not anybody specific. And I think they were just supposed to be like agents of like humans trying
Stooges.
to, round up mutants and all of that stuff. And I think in retrospect, there when I made that, and then when I made the Lila Cheney video, I feel like the Lila Cheney video is much more of like a culmination of like what I really wanted this thing to look and feel like, and much less compressed, compared to what the Dazzler video was. I'm extremely proud of the Dazzler video, and it was like one of those two videos are just like the most fulfilling creative projects that I've ever done. But like, yeah, I probably would have thought about like who the bad guy, or like who all of the characters are, because again, like you have a little bit amount of time. Like, could we have put somebody else in that role? So there wasn't anybody specific. Maybe it could have been Hellfire Clubby, like the whatever, like the weird henchman that they have. It could have been something like that.
Sure. Although the
But
purple suit and white mask might have stood out in, in a club, but
yeah. But like it is jam packed full of Easter eggs still. Like
long shot.
in the long shot, which is a big one. I can't even remember. There might have been an early time in which he wasn't in there, and I think I was just like, again, I have a chance to put long shot in there. Long shot. When is that guy ever going to be in the movie? Gotta put him in, but like her being like working for like a fast food chain, like fast food mascot, like that was a thing in the comics, and her fighting a roller derby team was a thing in the comics, and I really wanted to showcase more of the less popular storylines. And I think that's what people really gravitated towards. Like, this is a real Dazzler fan project,
Yes. Again, being on Tumblr and most likely being discovered mostly by Dazzler fans who read that miniseries. Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me personally, it did, that Dazzler mini was really something different in that it was occurring at the same time, but it was much more just, as you said, life. And, instead of having an ongoing adversary, most of the time there'd be, a villain of the week type thing, but a comic format. And
and I think that's the thing that's been tough, that is tough about Dazzler as a character within the X-Men world, is that like, unless she is the star of her own series, it's kind of hard to have her just be in the background, because she is not a character that really wants to be in the action, So, the idea of like, oh, could she be one of the X-Men, like, could she join the actual X-Men team? Like, yes, of course, she's always fun and she has an attitude and all of that stuff. But like, just from the essence of her character, I feel like she just ends up fulfilling a more generic superhero role when she's in a team environment. So I think it's always been hard as far as exploring her character goes when you're reading about her more in the team world. So I'm really, really excited to hear about this, the Dazzler series coming out.
I was going to add.
Yeah.
Sounds appears like it will be much more of a throwback to that original mini, just, Dazzler on the road.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with that as well.
I mean, one of the other things that I'm very curious about is that X-Men, that world is one big continuity. Stuff has like we're under the assumption that everything that happened in the past has still happened generally. So like, who is Dazzler to the real world in that timeline? Like, do people?
You mean now? Is she? Or...
like, is she a person that were in that world? Like, do people remember that she was some type of pop star in the past? And in the comic, is she going to be like, is it going to be a comeback thing? Like, what is it? And I think like that's not something that you need to think about too hard with the X-Men and with the Marvel timeline and stuff.
Sure.
But like, I always like and personally prefer the Dazzler that is like, the underdog, right? You know, it's she can be a giant pop star, but I think again the really good conflict with her is when she is not the biggest pop star in the world, that she's, you know, that she's struggling to gain some type of recognition. But yeah, she'd existed like that, you know, Dazzler the movie, like that, you know, like that happened in the world of the X-Men, you know.
And it makes sense that you made her music video first, considering the character debuted first, you know, 70s, Dark Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
And then moving on to my girl, Lilia. I'm horrible with pronouncing her name, but
I call her Lila for the longest time. I think people call her Lila. It's all right.
Lila, yeah, that.
Again, as a Filipino, like when I was young, as a Filipino
yeah.
person, like I had no idea how to pronounce any of these, and the names of like the creators, like Fabian Deshays, like I didn't know how to pronounce. You know, they all had such cool names, cool exotic names.
Them more often than you'd hear them, so you know how they'd be spelled, but in terms of pronunciation, like
Berserker Rage, I did not know how that would be, you know, how that was supposed to be read. Anyway.
For me, Children of the Atom is what we know how to pronounce it. But Berserker Rage. No, insert sound clip here. But
yeah, for Lila.
Yeah. Which is, again, I feel like they both have their own fandoms, and I feel like it really does go back to particular taste in music. Like Dazzler really is that. Well, Dazzler started literally as a disco character. I mean, if you know the behind the scenes, why she was created to begin with, it was literally trying to start a synergy with a disco label.
Disco label, yeah.
And then as disco died,
it debuted in 1980.
yeah. So didn't have much time as a disco.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, I'm pretty sure that first scene with her, you know, in the Dark Phoenix Saga was not a disco club. Yeah, they quickly moved her more into the Madonna material girl type of thing. Whereas Lila Cheney always struck me as being more of a kind of a gonna pronounce this name too, but Joanna Jett kind of more.
Yeah, I think like Joan Jett, I think is definitely like the #1, you know, like influence for her. I mean, like Chris Claremont,
she even
you know,
looks like her. Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, the Chris Claremont era, there are some very, very blatant, you know, kind of like references and homages.
And put you in the butt. Yeah,
yeah. It's just like, you know, Inferno with Ghostbusters, and you know, Cable with Terminator, and the Brood with Alien. Like they were so shameless in a kind of way that like if you were to do it now, like they would just get like ripped apart about how much of a ripoff this stuff was.
Yeah.
But so I think Joan Jett, when I started working on the Lila video, I definitely watched and rewatched a lot of Joan Jett music videos, Pat Benatar. And then, you know, when I was making both videos, they weren't meant to be set in the 80s. They were meant to have a vibe, you know, but I didn't want them to be set in the 80s just because, like, I'm not, you know, with Dazzler, like, she's going to be, like, skating through the streets, and I'm not going to, like, I don't want to have,
put in, you know, and find all refurbished
vintage cars or whatever. That's not going to happen. So
she has a cell phone. I noticed that right away.
Yeah, exactly. And like people were immediately jumped on that. I was like, no, that's not. It's a vibe. It's just about the feeling of it. So I also, for both videos, I was also looking at kind of like contemporaries of that style. So for Dazzler, I had been listening a lot to like Robin and, you know, Gaga and Kylie Minogue and all of that stuff. And then for Lila, I was really into Sahara Hot Nights at the time. So just sweaty girl rock, very punky, high energy, you know. So yeah, like both of them, I put a lot of research looking at the cinematography, especially to really nail the look and the costumes and all of that stuff.
I mean, the cinematography of the Dazzler one had that kind of almost slick 80s vibe.
Yeah, there's a lot of fog machine in that.
But I felt like even more so for the Lila music video, which really did have that more kind of later 80s, early 90s. I felt kind of like almost Nirvana-ish
Yeah,
grunge kind of tint to it, and much more dirty, like you were
yeah.
saying, the
Yeah,
stage.
absolutely. Yeah, I think like if a lot of times when people think about like 80s rock, it feels, kind of like more like hair metal kind of stuff. And I think you do have this kind of like slick, kind of like very artificial kind of feel to it. But when I was rewatching the Joan Jett videos, like this is a lot grimier
Mm-hmm.
than I remember it being, very Super 8 film kind of a feeling as opposed to a video, VHS kind of a feel, which I think like the Dazzler video has a
Right.
little bit more of you know so yeah, like doing the research really helped me kind of re-ground myself in the aesthetic.
I mean, like you were saying earlier, I personally didn't discover the X-Men until the 90s with the cartoon and the relaunch and
Hmm.
everything. And of
Hmm.
course, that's when they quickly married off Dazzler and sent her to the Mojoverse where she wouldn't be singing for like a decade. Her
I
baby
will
mother.
say, but from an
Uh,
aesthetic standpoint, I think that's the coolest look that she had, like, which is why in
uh,
the I this is why I ended up going with the 80s kind of like the blue suit a little bit more.
then
I
the
totally.
sparkly disco outfit.
Yeah, and you know what? Like I absolutely respect the disco look, and like that is her probably more iconic look than anything else. It's just a totally personal preference of mine. I just think like Jim Lee drew her really hot in the 90s, even though she was still just in the background as, Longshot's love interest.
I mean, I too get the love for it, but in terms of like it'd be a very different vibe shooting scenes of her rollerblading down the streets of New York in that outfit than in the
Mhm.
one that you can kind of hide behind a coat, right? Like, you
Yeah.
can't hide that sparkly outfit.
No,
That
absolutely.
sticks
And I
out.
think it's that reminds me of like, now in the later comics, especially during like the Krakoa era, watch, kind of seeing where she pops up here and there. And I think what's really funny to me is that like I can't remember what if she had like a Hellfire Gala vibe to her, but I was like, she has to look even sparklier than everybody's wearing sparkly. So like whatever her outfit is has got to be extra sparkly because her normal mode is sparkly.
Right.
And I was a little bit. It was like I felt like that was a little bit of a missed opportunity.
Um,
Like if you're the Lady Gaga and then suddenly everybody else dressed like Lady Gaga, how is Lady
right.
Gaga going
How
to
are you
dress?
gonna up your game even more?
Yeah,
I mean, I am thinking of that really sparkly Hellfire gown, but it's been a while, but I think that was actually Magic Eliana who was sporting that and not
yeah,
Dazzler. So that was a swap. But
yeah.
getting back to Lila, which I feel
Hmm.
like also Dazzler through Krakoa and now getting her own miniseries is kind of having a bit of a comeback in the real world as well as in Marvel canon, which
Hmm.
is great. A lot
Yeah.
of fans dressing up as cosplaying, I guess is the proper term for
Hmm.
her.
Hmm.
A lot of love there, which is great. I love me
Hmm.
some Dazzler.
Hmm.
Lila, I'm still waiting for her comeback. I don't know
I
where
Yeah,
she's
I
at.
mean, I can't. She's not with Cannonball. I'm not 100%
No,
on anything,
no,
right?
because
Because
even in
Cannonball's with
Krakoa,
who? Yeah.
yeah,
He's married with kids now, so that's
right,
like
yes,
supposed to not be happening. Again, that's the tough thing
true,
about
true,
Lila is
but
that like
yes,
what makes Lila cool is that she's got her own stuff going, right? And
yes,
and she's not.
they're very similar in terms of neither of them are really team players. I
Yeah.
mean, in different ways.
I mean,
Uh,
in a lot of ways, Lila is who Dazzler would want to be. Like she is, she actually is. She's intergalactically successful or whatever.
sure, right.
She's got her own bodyguard and all of that stuff. But yeah, like I think, like by virtue of who they are and how they're written, I think they are both extremely cool characters. But that, yeah, you cannot have them.
In a
You can't
team,
spend too
really.
much time with them in a
Yeah.
team. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
But
But yeah, like I think as a result, there's always room for a Lila, mini series or anything.
maybe throw Cannonball back in that. I get that he's married to kids, but maybe he could be a bodyguard again or
Ooh,
something, you know?
yeah,
Not have to
is
be romantic. But
strong
and
strong
even at
guy.
the time, that was interesting because she's
Mm.
older
I have
than he was,
there
but
is, especially again, rereading all of that stuff as an adult, there is a lot of 13-year-olds hanging out.
yeah,
What
Claremont
I think are
was
supposed to be
doing that.
adults. Yeah, Kitty Pryde and Colossus, and they're just,
Yes, the whole BDSM wear of Hellfire
yeah.
Club,
Yeah, I don't think I could, yeah,
yeah. Other stuff
the
I don't think, as you were saying, would necessarily fly in the books today.
if you were if we want to adapt things as accurately as possible, there are some things that probably, could not really be adapted exactly as
um,
um
but I did love like her music video, turning them into you know, the new, because this is more of like, now we're entering more of the X-Men lore that I remember.
mhm,
I have since, through the magic of limited. If they
exactly.
don't, you can if you want. I'm open, but I will still swear that it like is the best thing in terms of going back and reading
Mhm.
stuff that you have missed compared to what you and I had to do, which and not everything was in trays, and some of the
Yeah.
single issues were prohibitively expensive, and so there.
Mm.
But so again, the uh, Lila stuff, starting with Kitty's ballet teacher.
Stevie Hunter.
Thank you. I
Hmm.
I had her name and then it just, but yes. The call back to Kitty. Tell Kitty to do her stretches. So just love that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
as
it's the Lila video is much more of an adaptation of the graphic novel of the New Mutants. What is it? Annual? What is I have it on my wall, but it's over there. New Mutants Annual.
yes,
Um
which
so
was they're like forming a first kind of official appearance, right? If I remember with
no, that's the graphic novel was their first appearance. The annual was,
oh,
like
okay.
whatever supposed to be there after their full year, and that's the Steal This Planet, Lila Cheney, Bill Sienkiewicz, cover with Cannonball in the
Oh, okay. Yes,
in the
I have it in
dominatrix,
my
outfit
yes.
kind of stuff. But yeah, like the Dazzler video, what's much more about putting different stories from her entire series. The the Lila video is much more as much of an adaptation of that single issue as I could possibly fit. Um, so I believe it did open with them in Stevie Hunter's class, and then and
Sneaking into
Roberto,
that, yeah.
yeah, Roberto having getting the tickets, and all of that stuff. So it in many ways it helped me kind of like figure out, okay, how does this story go? But even then, in the original version of that, like the music videos are like 3-4 minutes long. Like how that's so little time. And in the original script, I wasn't even sure whether or not how much we would see of the New Mutants. I think in many originally they would just go to the show together, uh, and then Cannonball would go off, and that is kind of what happened. But like I much more expanded the beginning where they didn't all of those New Mutants characters didn't have lines originally, and you don't see their powers. And I was like, I'm already casting these people. I'm already paying for the costumes. We'll be at the show. Like you have to give them lines, and that's really I when I make these, I'm always thinking about it's a fan film, and we're making it for ourselves as fans, and I never want to waste the audience's time and my time with these characters. So if I have them and I have, even if it's just 4 minutes, like I want to give all of them lines. I want to have cram Stevie Hunter in there. If Stevie Hunter's going to have a line? What's the line going to be about? Is it going to be about Kitty Pryde? But just like throw everybody in there, and then I was like, oh, like yeah, they should show their powers off in some way. Again, very important. And I think like that's whenever we see depictions of these characters in movies, and we don't really resonate with them, I think it's because you feel like they went through the effort of putting these characters on the screen, but they don't actually capitalize on them. They're just in the background. They don't have lines when
Right.
they could just easily have one line. X2, I think, is still to me one of my favorite superhero movies, and definitely my favorite superhero X-Men movie. And I think like there is such an efficiency in the way that the characters give their lines that I think like almost every line is about who that character is.
And
You
each
know?
character is, I mean, that too is also my favorite X-Men movie.
Yeah.
And each character is fully utilized.
Yeah. And they bounce like when they interact with each other, like
Yeah.
when they enter, you know, like you just see like the tiny scene of Nightcrawler and Mystique, you know,
I
and
was just
it's
looking
just
at that.
it's just one tiny exchange, and
You
anybody
shouldn't
could have
have
had.
to hide. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
yeah.
it's an entire movie. It's an entire issue of a comic book, you know, right there. And I think
Yes.
like that's just like you have that kind of responsibility as a filmmaker to go and do that. And like my music videos are extremely cheesy. Again, they're only 4 minutes long. They cost like $2,000 each. But like you know, like just give the fans the feeling that they want to get when they see these characters on the screen, you know?
Well, I feel like that really, that feeling of the characters and the vibe and the world really comes through. And maybe, you were saying the lack or whatever of skill or knowledge in terms of making music videos, but I feel like I didn't get that from watching either of them, and it
Mm-hmm.
might be because of the times that they're meant to.
Mm-hmm.
Music videos became much different and
Mm-hmm.
much shorter even than
Mm-hmm.
3 minutes now. Like it's a minute 50 tops. But
Mm-hmm.
the other thing I wanted to ask you about was for both videos, the casting of
Mm-hmm. Sure.
everyone from the was so on point. What was the process there?
Yeah, so Dazzler was our first time doing this, obviously, and that was that was so important, you know. And again, luckily, my music producer, songwriter Taiwo Heard, like it was really he was the first person that I really kind of like discussed this with because there are things that are non-negotiable with this project. The song was an important one, and so I wanted to bring him on early on because that's the one that I absolutely had no clue about. And then, so when he and I were going back and forth, I was like, "Do you know anybody who could sing?" Well, it's just like it has to be triple threat. It has to be somebody who could sing, who could act, who could dance, but then also has to look like her.
Right.
And it was just pure luck that he was like, "I think I do," and it was Gentry Roth, who is the person that we ended up casting. We did not do any other. We did not meet with anybody else at the time. It was just, we met her, and her attitude was so great, and she didn't know comics really that well, and definitely didn't know Dazzler, but like she immediately gravitated towards that character. She was at the time an aspiring actress here in Los Angeles, and you just know you immediately identify with the struggles of Dazzler,
And those little
and
side hustles that you have to do just to
yeah, and
get
which
a
she
name
absolutely
tag. And, yeah.
she was like, I'm a clown. I do clown stuff. Yes, done, sold. That's in the movie. Like that's in the video. So we just got so lucky with her, and it was similar in the Lila Cheney video. So that we had a guitarist. We just had somebody as an extra who played the guitarist in Dazzler's video, and actually part of the inspiration for making the Lila Cheney video was somebody in the comments was like, "Hey, is that Lila?" And I didn't mean for that to happen. It was just another of Ty's friends that could be the guitar player in the background. And I was like, yes, that does look exactly like Lila.
Now I'll
And
have to go back and rewatch it yet again.
we had it's a different actress, and we had offered her the role, but she's not really an actress, so I think, or like she didn't get back to us, which was unfortunate. But that was part of the inspiration for it. But when she didn't get back to us, I asked Ty again, "Do you know somebody who could do this?" And I can't remember if he knew exactly who. It was a friend of a friend, and we found Sage Montclair, and she again like just blew us away on first meeting, which was really great because I didn't want to have to do a long audition process for this whole thing. She is a killer. She had a killer voice. She had she had a really, really good kind of rock star vibe to her. And then once she put the wig on, I was like, oh my god! Immediately she disappeared, and Lila showed up. for the New Mutants, I had to do a more of a casting call, and I was very, very cognizant of all of the different parameters that I had to hit with all of them. And like I'm so proud of all of those actors because again, there's no budget for all of these people. Were doing it for fun, basically, And I think you probably, as with your web series, and like that's it's extreme. There are so many things that you got to juggle with the huge limitations that you have. So there are things that I think I am proud of the amount of detail that we put towards casting everybody. There are some parts of it that I think, we could have been a little bit more meticulous on. But yeah, like to me, I was like, they have to look the parts, they have to look young, and I wanted them to be like their heights to be like correct,
Yeah.
Roberto had to be like super short. Sam had to be the tallest, and then kind of the girls and all of that stuff. And it was really, really hard. It took a really, really long time, and God bless the people that that went and that we got for him.
Just as a little aside on that note, since you mentioned it, so in the project that I'm working on, which we're not here to plug, but X-Men: Children of the Atom, one of our characters is Piotr Rasputin, Colossus. Besides sister, actually, in your video. And we have this amazing, kind-hearted, soulful, artistic, actually Russian-born actor. He's been working out to put on the pounds. He's a big dude. But in the comics, even before he armors up, Piotr is like huge. He's like 7 feet tall. He towers over everybody else. So currently, like, I'm like, how am I going to do that? Am I just going to have him sitting on crates and like whenever he's sitting next to people, which is what they did in X-Men 1, or like get him shoes with stilts, or so I can relate to that.
Again, these are characters that exist. They are not we did not create these characters. We love these characters for their iconic looks. And I think there is a responsibility on our part to be as faithful to those characters, and to
project. So I mean, you didn't get paid for this. So why make them if not for just the utter love and creativity involved with these characters, right?
Yeah. But I also feel that way about the official adaptations of these characters. Again, like if you're gonna put these characters on the screen, like can they just at least look a little more and sound a little bit more like what they're supposed to? And I think again, it's getting closer and closer. It gets better and better.
Yes,
it has, where we were back in 2000. X-Men the movie comes out, and I thought it's still amazing and groundbreaking, and I can't believe that they actually pulled it off. And I rewatched
leather, and he was a little tall.
Yeah, despite all of that, but like I rewatched that. I watched it so much when I was in high school, and then I didn't watch it again for a while because X2 came out, and X2 blows my mind. And I remember my feeling of X-Men, the first movie, waning a little bit because like thinking again, like man, like the leather and all of that stuff like just doesn't immediately hold up. But then I watched it again, and like that movie is only 100 minutes long versus 3 hours for movies nowadays. And again, the characters are so on point. The screenwriting and the character development in all of them is so on point. There's some weird ones, like how Storm, it's like your people, the characters are going to get.
I mean...
But still, like within the world that they're in, like everybody is so well defined and three-dimensional in it. And I
think each fit the soul, especially in that original trilogy, the soul of like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine feels like the Wolverine. Famke Jensen's Jean Grey has a character, the spirit I felt of comics. Jean Grey, everybody says that Jean Grey is motherly, which is true, but she also has this, this dark side, this seductive side to her, which was present in the films. Definitely.
So I think like the look is important. So like black leather, not like does not hold up as well now that people have more kind of accurate costumes, but more importantly, that like don't waste the characters themselves, you know. It's always a huge like crime if like you see a superhero but they don't actually use their superhero power at the very least. They should I think they should all have costumes no matter what. Like whenever like
Yes.
you know, Robert Downey Jr. spends most of the movie without without the helmet. I was like, no, that put the mask on, Iron Man. But like at the very least, like at least Dazzler in Dark Phoenix, she sings and she does sparkly things. But like, you know, like Jubilee, we saw Jubilee. Like Jubilee was in like 3 of those movies, and she didn't sparkle anything. Yeah, exactly. Just make them sparkle something, you know.
Well, she did. They had scenes in both X2 and the age that one, and both scenes were deleted. Most of her, she was in each and every movie, and most of her scenes got deleted. But so again, having just watched, I was very impressed by how you pulled off the look. Going back to keeping comic appropriate look, the look of Guido.
Oh yeah,
the Strongman's comic, and like I mean, it's just. That's not real. Like, yeah, I don't know what that is.
I loved it. You know, I didn't as a '90s kid. I only knew him from X Factor.
Sure,
and he is a character that can only be drawn in a ridiculous way. Yeah. I see. You know, some artists have done him since then, and he's still giant, but he's kind of like realistic or like not grotesque. And I'm like, no, he's like Warlock. Yeah, like he's like Warlock. He's a character that only looks in a cubist
I agree. He looks weird when they're trying to make him just look like, I don't know, a guy on major roids. Like
no, he has like a hamburger head. He's like the thing with skin, you know,
as it goes down somehow.
Yeah, like he is the thing, except he's not made out of rocks, you know. So that character. If you go on my website, greasypigstudios.com, not to plug my own stuff, but and actually, I guess you can watch it on YouTube. I have like a VFX behind the scenes of how we did that scene, and like spoiler alert, that Guido is almost entirely not CG, but like the way that they did skinny Chris Evans and Captain America, like just patching together and like Photoshop stretching him Photoshop wise, you know.
The title card scene at the end of the music video, which is just a still shot of him. I was paying because you do have that, and I was staring at that, wondering how, like, is that a cutout, and then you impose the actor's head? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, so it's I asked my producers, like, who do we know that is bald and extremely muscular, and we found a guy, and it's funny because you meet him and he is big and muscular and you know, definitely more muscle bound than anybody else on set, but then you think about what Guido is, and that guy's a matchstick. That's not him at all. So, but he had the curves in his muscles that gave me enough to be able to puff him up. Again, it's just a lot of like it's just Photoshop and After Effects filters of doing that, and you know, he's just this. Yes. So like you can stretch things out and all of that stuff.
And it wasn't a full body shot, and it wasn't
a full body shot. He is moving though. It's not just a still image. He is like breathing a little bit. So I had to do a little bit of VFX motion tracking. And I, as a person who has that, you know, in his background, I knew I was able to plan ahead of like, here's what I know I can accomplish. He's not going to be turning around. He's not going to be joining in on the action, you know, so I can do it. Again, I want to set a target and I want to hit it. So I want Guido in there. How can I make it be the Guido that people want to see when they see it? Because if Guido's going to show up in a movie, he better look absolutely grotesque.
Yes.
And it's not just, you know, the guy playing Jack Reacher, you know?
Sure.
It's just not good enough still, you know? No matter how big that guy is, he's not good enough.
Well, that's a great segue into the special effects. Blew me away, especially considering this is, as you said, the 10th year anniversary for the Dazzler one. So
yeah,
I mean, what people are capable of pulling off on their home computers today has gone a long way, I feel like, in the past 10 years. But,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that just like the production values of everything has just gone up. And what's so great about the fan community is that, again, they are so dedicated. It's almost like it's like open sourced, like they can almost beat the production values of Marvel because they are they will do this, they will make the costumes, they will do the VFX in their bedrooms in the middle of the night all on their own, and they are 100% dedicated to making it look exactly as comic accurate as possible. And that's what's really cool, but also kind of intimidating about getting this stuff done. I don't
like the wrecking ball that was cut. Sorry.
yeah. So that's a lot of that is CG. I do that again. I do that stuff for a living. It's not it's not again, I tried to do things that I know I could pull off. So again, she's not fighting any other superheroes or anything at the time. And and I was the VFX supervisor when we were shooting it. So I said, put the camera over here and here's what we're going to see. And, I knew exactly what it was going to be as opposed to, if I was just, if I wasn't the director and the VFX supervisor at the same time, a lot of times directors will just shoot or cinematographers will just shoot and then they'll give the VFX person the footage. And I'm just not good enough to be able to take any kind of footage necessarily
somehow
to
do something with VFX.
Yeah, they're like, okay, now put, a CG robot in the back. It's like, oh, okay. And the Lila video is much more expansive VFX wise, and it was just really fun. And a lot of it was stuff that I hadn't necessarily done before, but I was just so motivated in a way that I think a lot of fans are of like, I just want to play in that world. So yeah, I was in I was in my room at 3 a.m, kind of figuring out how to pull this stuff off.
Lila's, I feel like we're talking about Dazzler a lot more, but I feel like that's because I have a lot more questions about that.
No, of course.
Lila was amazing, but as you said yourself, this was your second one, and her powers, looked impressive, but they also kind of looked like how I assumed they would. I was like, your approach to establishing Dazzler's powers, though, was something unique that I hadn't really either thought of or seen before in any adaptation. I mean, you did the hand stuff, but she also kind of had this, again, using an 80s reference, it's almost like Care Bear stairs.
Yeah. So, well, I think a really good segue for this, because I would be remiss if I did not bring up the costumes for both of the videos, specifically because the people who did the costumes deserve so much credit for this whole thing. Lital Platt designed the Dazzler costume originally, and I did have very strong opinions about how I wanted that costume. I wanted it to be comic accurate, but I did want it to feel a little. I didn't want it to just be spandex. I didn't I didn't want it to just be very, very cosplay-y. Right. I wanted it to still feel cinematic and movie-like. So I had very strong ideas in my head of like how to make it look. Like again, the MCU had finally come out.
Latex was not, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We were finally getting good costume, designs, Captain America, and all of that stuff. So I was like, okay, I want to do that for the Dazzler costume. Again, at the time, people thought Dazzler was kind of a joke. Very disco-y. Like I think most people didn't have particularly high expectations of how a real life Dazzler would look. So, but I really wanted it to feel like a real, movie costume. And I had Lital do it, she does movie costume, but she's also just a straight up fashion designer. And I came to her with a sketch that I thought was pretty good. And I was like, here's how I'm envisioning it. And she just kind of like looks at it, and then she like takes out her sketchbook and she just starts sketching. And it's like, what? This looks like an actual like fashion template, and it's just gorgeous immediately. She says, it's like, all right, for this part, I want to do these materials. And I think I want to do like kind of like ribbed over here to enhance the silhouette. And it just like, I was so happy and it was so satisfying to have her go and do that, because again, costumes are so important to me. It's a comic book movie. The costumes are important. The powers are important on top of the characters. So like when that happened, I think that did help kind of motivate the VFX of like how her powers were going to manifest themselves. She designed, like the star on her isn't necessarily meant to be gold or sparkly in the comics, and I think most of the interpretations in cosplay just has like a yellow star here. But Lital was like, I'm gonna do like sequins and like a lot of texture, so that when we shot it, she just glittered, immediately. You just put the light on her and she does that. So like, well, good. That makes it easier for me, because her powers are pretty abstract. It's like laser, like you don't it could be interpreted in
whatever that really a real term.
Yeah, and the way that they draw him in the comics, changed a lot. The way that her powers are drawn in the 80s, when they showed it more kind of like as lasers as opposed to like lens flares or something. So it really could be anything. And sometimes as a VFX artist, the hardest kind of VFX is the one where like you're not trying to make it look like anything real. You're trying to make it look like something completely unreal that you've never seen before. And it was good to be able to have some sort of motivation that like, all right, she has like the sparkly knuckles and she has the sparkly thing. Like, let's make the light come out of that. And I like that made it really much, much easier for me, as opposed to like how to do laser tracking from her finger.
Sure. Also gives you kind of a starting, as you said, point. You can build out from what is already there.
Yeah, exactly. And actually depicting how comic powers look is a really, really hard thing to do.
It's a different medium. It's a visual medium, and when a lot of these characters were first created and their powers were first shown, they weren't thinking about movies or how to do. They were just thinking, how does this look on a page if I draw this? Right?
Like the Kirby crackle, which is like I think that's and I tried to do that when I did Cannonball's powers in the Lila Cheney video. It's just like, how does that look? Like little balls around, like. And
the sound effect as well, that a company that I loved your approach to, because usually it's when I see cosplay or whatever that tries, it's just they replace the legs with the light trail, which looks good, but in terms of, as you were saying, trying to translate it to something more functional or movie-ish, I guess, that the whole him instead being a silhouette that then converges into the tail makes much more sense.
Yeah, so it's I say that to sympathize with anybody who's trying to like do the VFX to portray how these powers work. It's so hard. Like glowing eyes has never ever looked good to me, and like especially like glowing eyes that have like they're drawn as though there's like smoke or fire coming out of them. It just looks so silly when you actually see it in motion. And which is really tough, because some of these characters look, you mean for them to have white glowing eyes, and a lot of times they just look really, really.
The one
really
that
silly.
I love is trying to because I'm not a VFX artist, but I know the comics. They're trying to convey the difference between a Cyclops Optic blast and a Superman heat vision.
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I look forward to somebody, like, if the new X-Men movie wants to do the real, Cyclops blast. But that being said, the comics are very inconsistent. But yeah, like if I want to see a force blast, that it's not setting stuff on fire, and that if it's just a solid pink, it's a punch,
right. Well, it's from the punch first. So.
Yeah, exactly. I feel that way about like when people have like fireballs coming out of their arms, and it's drawn in the comics as though like a very circle, thing. But like in the comic, and when you depict that, is it supposed to be on fire? Is it supposed to be like solid? Is it actually supposed to be spheres? Really, really hard. Which is why when I originally wrote the New Mutants treatment, they weren't necessarily supposed to show their powers. And then when I decided that they
did,
they did, I still tried to like only for 2 seconds. Yeah.
It was enough though. As a old school New Mutants fan, like Rain starting to wolf out a bit, Dazzler
You just need the
starting.
tiniest nod to show to the fans that like I
Yeah.
respect this character. I know that this character is cool, and
Warlock's
you know.
head starting to glitch just for like
I
a
can't
second,
that.
but
Oh, I don't think that was the actor did that. Completely unscripted. I don't think I had
you
him
see
showing.
like there's a
Yeah.
it doesn't I think like 2 frames, but you
Mhm.
see the
Yeah. Yeah. He
mechanical
glitches.
or what. Yeah,
Right. I don't think it was written originally because I didn't know how I was going to pull him off. Because again, as we agreed, him and Guido, like these characters are just so ridiculous
yeah,
looking, and you can't show them in a realistic way. And I feel like you know, I didn't show Roberto using his powers, so I think originally I might not have had Warlock showing his powers because I have no idea how I could possibly pull something like that off. But the actor just did it, and I didn't know that he did it until I was looking at the footage after the fact, putting editing together, and I see him do it. Him and the character who was playing Cypher had worked out their relationship to each other. Like so you can see in the video that they're like gravitating towards each other, they high five each other. I didn't write any of
yeah.
that, but when I described the characters to them, they did that on their own.
That's
And
amazing.
then when I was watching the footage later, I love that. And then he did this glitchy thing, robot thing. I was like, yes, that's it. There's an actual. I gotta do the actual character now. So I that's why it only lasts for 2 frames or whatever. But like, yeah, I did an actual CG Warlock head in there. And if you watch the VFX breakdown, you'll see how I actually did it. It does not. It would not hold up in a you know
If it lasted longer than just
in a
those two
long shot
frames,
in a close up,
but
you would not be able. That would not hold up at all. But for the 2 frames, it works. And it makes the difference if you're a Warlock fan. You're like, whoa! I just saw Warlock finally in a
yeah.
movie. You know,
And I love how stilted that actor was, very robotic.
it's
So
so I one of I don't know whether or not it's like a necessarily inappropriate. That actor was originally cast. I think he was supposed to be Cypher's character. I think he was originally cast as Cypher.
okay.
But then I was his height didn't match, or we couldn't find the right Cypher that would match up with the height. So then he ended up being too tall for that character, and I wanted somebody that looked a little bit smaller for Doug Ramsey. So finally another actor came in, and I think the actor who played Doug Ramsey probably came in for Cannonball. And I was like, oh, but you're too short, unfortunately. But I think you could be Cypher. So I cast him as Cypher, and I had to tell the other actor, you know, I think I'm gonna move you, but I think your look would work for Warlock. And I think, you know, no actor wants to hear that you've been recast, but I think he took it as a challenge. It's like, all right, well then I'm gonna be the best damn Warlock I can be. And he did it as a robot, you know,
Yeah.
and I love the actor who played Warlock, but played Cypher, but he doesn't really do much in the video. He's just mostly standing there, which is a lot of what Cypher does, unfortunately. Or like from a cinematic standpoint, he
Sure.
doesn't, you know,
Optic
really
and
get to
huge,
show off too
but
much. Yeah. So I think it worked out for everybody. I love how quirky he made that, and it inspired me to do the Warlock VFX shot.
well, again, going back, I just shows in the end things work out for the best because they all look the part. He looks like Doug, and he doesn't look like Cannonball. The actual actor you got for Cannonball, you know, the tall, kind of lanky. He
Mm-hmm.
looks more like Sam. So
Yeah, yeah.
things have a way of working.
I am so lucky with what we've got. There are you know, nothing is ever perfect, but like to pull that off, we did the Lila Cheney video in less time. I think it was the same budget, but like less time than we did the Dazzler video. And I think, you know, it's like 5 times more epic and it's bigger and all of that stuff. But like, you know, I didn't do any GoFundMe or any, you know, crowdsourcing for all of this stuff. It's entirely out of pocket. So that was really all all I could afford. So for what we got for the budget, I'm so proud and I'm so grateful for all of those people that were involved with it, you know.
So I guess a couple of closing questions.
Sure.
Um, And we're having this interview because it's the 10-year anniversary, which, wow. And it's still, watched and adored by fans and new fans alike. It was just recently screened, I believe, at last year's inaugural Uncanny Expo.
Mm-hmm.
How did, 10 years on, how does it feel?
I mean, I was thinking about it, and and almost all of it has nothing to do with the Dazzler video, but like where I was in my life at that time versus where I'm at now was already big, but then like so in a way, I just feel so lucky to have done it. Because if I hadn't done it then, I probably would have never, gotten to do it. And as a, it's just, again, it was such a quick and painless and organic experience. And a lot of those people that I worked with there, a lot of them are people that I'd worked with before, but doing that experience with them, especially they've become lifelong friends. And even if some of them aren't in LA anymore, like I will always, we still follow, keep in touch on social media and all of that stuff. So the memories for it are just so great, and also like the experience of sharing it to the world was so overwhelming because I really didn't think anybody would see it, and for people to have seen it, and then not only did the fans see it and like it, which was obviously a huge validation, but then like creators saw it, like comic book creators saw it, and that's when I got to go to the conventions and like meet a lot of the artists and talk with them about them having seen it, and had them saying very kind words. That's very diplomatic of them to say. They don't have to say the kind words, but that they did. Like even getting like completely unsolicited comments from them. That Bob McLeod, the artist, co-creator of New Mutants, like he came out, he commented on the YouTube video without completely unprompted. Somebody, I guess. Fabian Nisheza, also like there were all of these creators whom I consider heroes of mine who would, comment positively to it. And I think like I really recognized how faithful and how lovingly it was done. Like those are experiences that I'm always going to look back on that fondly. Yeah, like Chris Claremont and Louise Simonson, like those were just like, that's just insane that I got to meet with them and that I could tell them what I did and they knew what it was. Freaking, like, how cool is that? Bill Sienkiewicz, also, oh my God, he's
amazing, uncanny. So, any hopes for a third then?
I really wanted, I made the Dazzler video without thinking of a sequel. And I made the Lila Cheney video without thinking of a sequel, just because, and I think you understand as a person trying to do this on their own time and their own money, you never know how, what the future is going. Yeah, exactly. Which is again, like which is why it's important that like if you're gonna make these, make the one be good if it's gonna be the last one. Like don't hold your punches. Just like make the best one that you can make. I had ideas for a third one that I had talked about before when I released the Lila Cheney video, and it was going to be even more obscure. I just wanted to keep going. Like, what else haven't we seen, or what else are we not going to see? And at the time, I had two ideas. I wanted to do the more logical one was I wanted to do something that was more like Fallen Angels from the 80s.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's like the kid with the lobsters and Whiz Kid, I can't remember. Multiple Man was in there, I can't remember exactly who those characters, but it had that very 80s, vibe, and I wanted it to feel like
the Dream Warrior vibes.
I wanted it to be like the song would be like the Kids in America, like we're the kids in
Sure.
America,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that kind of a vibe. So it's still 80s-ish vibe, but again, with like characters that you would never ever expect, a Leech and Artie, you know, like characters that you would never expect to be seen in a realistic way. I would have no idea how to pull them off in a, you know, real way. So that was one. Again, like keep pushing it weirder and less. I was not gonna go towards the mainstream X-Men characters at any point. The other idea that I had was something even more out of the
More
ordinary.
abstract than Fallen Angels.
It's a different, not necessarily. It was they're one of my favorite X-Men stories, and like rereading them on Marvel Unlimited, and revisiting those. I really fell in love with like the X-Men classic, like the kind of like side stories that they would introduce and things, or like the mini stories in annuals, you know, like the little short stories that they would tuck at the end of annuals, because I think they're just so character based. And there was a Dazzler one that Fabian DeShazer wrote that I think is just so cool. I can't remember. I guess it was like a supplemental story, I think, from the X-Men classic reprint of the Dark Phoenix saga, and it's this like very 90s, early 90s. Kind of like reality bites feel of like Dazzler and her friends talking in a coffee shop. And it's just her talking about how she'll never be a superhero. That's actually not what I wanted to redo, but there was another story, and I think it was an X Factor or X Force annual.
Loved having his characters just all sitting in a coffee shop talking about their life.
Exactly. But there was another story that had to have been like a filler story that they didn't get to print until sometime in the 90s. I think it was in like the Shattershot storyline, maybe. And it was Peter David wrote a story about Mystique and Destiny. And it was about when Mystique it was about how Destiny had been dead during that time. And this was during the time where, like, you know, there was no explicit definition of Mystique and Destiny's, you know, relationship to each other.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Fans all knew, but yes.
Exactly.
Thing written.
And certainly by the time that I was trying to make it, it had been, you know, much more explicit. But like there was this fantastic, really, really small story of the two of them, or it was Mystique being really, really mad about Destiny having died. And that was like fueling her anger during the 90s. And her going to Destiny is like, you can see the future. Did you not tell me that this was going to happen? And I'm so mad at you. And she, the story takes place on like a cruise ship, and it kind of like goes back in time, and they're on a cruise ship watching like a lounge singer sing like Obla Di Obla Da or something like that. And Destiny is just kind of like trying to tell Mystique to lighten up, like things aren't so bad. And this was supposed to take place during the 80s, so this is like a flashback. And Mystique tells her, like, there's nothing to be happy about anything. Like, you know, the world is terrible and all of that stuff. And then it cuts to the future, and Destiny's dead, and Mystique has her ashes in a box. And it said, and it had instructions on it that said, like, on this date, go on the cruise again. And during sunset, release my ashes, you know, into the wind. So she goes and does that, and and Mystique is still scowling this entire time. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm so mad at you. You know, like, how dare, we had plans.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah, exactly. We had plans. I don't want to be on a cruise ship by myself, especially, but I'm going to do it. You bitch, you know, like, I'm going to do it.
Make you
exactly. I got people to assassinate or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But so then, but it's like, all right, what's April 15th, 1994. I opened the box. She opens the box right at sunset, and she opens it up and releases the ashes, and the ashes flow out, and then the wind blows it right back in her face and just covers her in ashes. And then inside the box is a note from Destiny saying, "Lighten up."
So would that have been a music video as well, or then? Or that sounds more.
Yeah. So I if I wanted to make it to a music video, I would have done it like with the lounge singer. It would have been like kind of like the lounge singer act would have been like because again, like, it was like in the video they were singing like Beatles Obla Di Obla Da, life goes on. So it would, I don't want to get in trouble with them for
Right,
using
or
that
whoever
song, but
has
I
to
might
go on
have
that
used,
song, sure.
maybe I would have written something similar like that. But it didn't necessarily have to be a music video. I just, again, I wanted, whenever I'm making these, I want to tell stories that I think you wouldn't see in, you know, that the MCU isn't necessarily going to depict themselves.
Sure.
Because it's too obscure, or, you know, like, because it doesn't involve the real big heroes and all of that stuff. But for some reason, I actually got Peter David's half blessing. Not, he doesn't own those characters either, but he was, you know, like, if you do it, send it to me. That sounds really interesting. But I ended up never getting it because in the past 8 years or whatever, things have just kind of gone crazy in every possible direction. So I don't know that, you know, probably I'm not gonna never say never, but nobody should be holding my breath or holding their breath.
Holding your
There's
breath.
a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much stuff out. There's so much stuff out there. So much good stuff out there. Is Dazzler going to show up in Deadpool 3? We don't, you know, just like somebody out there can go and fulfill your fan service dreams on those, you know.
Fantastic. So what do you have coming up then?
Well, most of the work I do is on the TV side. Greasy Pig Studios. Yeah, I do a lot of work with like Food Network shows, like reality competitions. I do a lot of their graphics and all of that stuff. I'm in the process of putting a new reel together to show all of the latest stuff I did. In that time span, I actually created my own TV. I actually got a TV show made. It's this right there, Framed by the Killer, which was a true crime miniseries on Oxygen. They did 3 episodes of it, and they might have made more if the pandemic hadn't happened. It was Alexis.
Alexis just
yeah. Yes, thank you
for
for
today's true crime stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm just trying to I'm lucky to still be able to work in Hollywood. Things are tough out there for everybody right now. And then otherwise, I'm just being a fan of everything, you know, rereading. I hadn't really been following too much of the new X-Men stuff until the CoA stuff happened, and I'm still kind of catching up on everything there. And then I'm excited to go and see what's going to happen after that. And then X-Men 97, and then the movie. Oh man, I don't know how this movie X-Men 97 is just so good. I was like, they just raised the bar for the movie adaptation. I don't know if you can do it anymore because the cartoon was so good.
Well, we will see.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you, follow you, see work?
So, again, my website is greasypigstudios.com. The music videos are still on YouTube. I used to have a domain name just for them, but I'm not really maintaining them anymore. But if you search for Lila Cheney music video or Dazzler music video, so far, nobody else has done Lila or Dazzler music videos that would compete with mine. Thank God, and I think that was part of by design. So you can still find them on YouTube. They are still getting people discovering them, and whenever Lila or Dazzler gets mentioned in any comics, or again, like there are Taylor Swift fans slowly discovering them, you know. So those are all still online, and then I'm on Instagram at Greasy Pig Studios. So yeah, let's everybody keep up the fan chatter.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here at X-Men Exposed, and again, a happy 10th anniversary.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you keep Children of the Atom, keep the, you know, like the fan vibes going. I want to see more, especially since there's still no movies. If there are no movies, they got it. You know, we need more.
It's a work in progress, is what I will say here. But
I totally know what you mean. All right. Have a good one. Thank you so much.